Mutalith Vortex beasts. Story continued from Lord of Skulls and Wordbearer playlist. Zamet Heket was a mighty sorcerer of the Thousand Suns. Few were there that could even approach his power, his knowledge, his subtlety. Yet one of those few stood across from him now, and he did not like it. For the being in front of him did not wear the colours and heraldry of his own legion. He was no son of Magnus, and so it galled Zamet Heket that he existed, let alone that he was now so close, stood right before him. The Astartes in the crimson armour was powerful indeed, but even so, he was merely an ambassador to a greater terror, a more insidious force. Zamet Heket, how are you now that your king has returned? Things go apace, I hope? Why are you here? Straight to the point. No welcome to a brother of the ancient legions. What do you want? Well, if we are to dispense with the pleasantries, then allow me to be direct. We want you and your band. We want your power. We want you beside us when we call the crusade. Beneath them, the swirling amphitheatre's form shifted constantly. The marble-tiered seats seemed to flux and undulate like the surface of a tumultuous sea, rising and falling in waves. The walls of the central area rose and fell, bursting into multicolored frames of every hue and brightness, then back again. Nothing stayed static here. Nothing was certain. The entire landscape mutated as they spoke, for they stood on the planet of the sorcerers. They stood on Sotiarius, an almost unheard of event for one who was not a Thousand Son, to be even permitted to approach, let alone set foot on this world. But it was not really there. None of it. For the Wordbearer and Zamet Heket both stood in a completely different realm. They stood in the astral, is one way of putting it. Were facing off in the warp, might be a more accurate assessment. Perhaps they were in the warp and above Sotiarius. Perhaps it was just a mindscape formed by one or other of the Chaos Astartes. But if so, whose dream were they in? Who had mastery? If it were near anyone else, Zamet Heket would know it was he. But this Wordbearer, this rarest of all their kind, he was a thing of power and subtlety even more so than Heket. Nor was he impressed by any of the mind-smashing stimuli going on around him. Beneath them, doorways opened from multiple breaches in the flames, and into the sands beneath ran a crowd of bedraggled and beaten humans. Hundreds, if there were one. All had ran from something, not to the arena. When the flames leapt back into place, they were surrounded and unable to escape. They stopped running and then milled in the center, confused and scared. It was at this point that the Wordbearer then turned and spoke again. Oh, a show. How considerate of you. Something out of the ordinary, I sincerely hope. Zamet Heket ignored the Wordbearer as they both now looked down at the scene unfolding beneath. The ground now seemed to open up at the center of the viewing arena, and out of the sands came a thing of abject horror. It towered over its throng of victims as the ground beneath it became solid finally. A huge burning effect over the top of it, the being itself was a thing of muscle, maw, and claw. It twisted and shifted just by standing, no form set, no consistency whatsoever. And as they both looked down, the thing bellowed to the sky and then began its rampage. It opened its maw, and hundreds of tentacles exploded forward, wrapping around victims and bringing them back to its teeth and stomach as swiftly as any hunting frog. But this was not all. As the Mutalith assailed everything there, it was no less true for the basic building blocks and laws of reality. The very air burst into flame and then transformed to water, then to smoke, then back again, in a constant slide. The ground shifted in pattern and form, from grass to stone to sand again. Many of the humans around it were not even touched, and were rent in half, only for the top half to fall on its hands and run around on them, while its head screamed, and the hips and below just charged onwards until stopped by another person or another obstacle, but lay kicking if knocked over. Hair began to develop faces and teeth and tear at the very heads that they were attached to. Eyeballs began to become acid and then just burn through the skulls of the people there. Reality was thrown on its side. Things that were balls of constant writhing muscle exploded into being as the bone and sinew of many in the arena distended and shrank again in excruciating waves of change. The mere presence of the Mutalith was rewriting and unwriting reality around it so dizzyingly that it was impossible for any normal mortal being to view such things and remain sane. What a magnificent beast! My own acolytes have had some difficulty forming them. Well, those who tried anyway. They were few. I will take 12. And you and your men, of course. It was at this Zamet Haket finally turned to him and gave him his full, undivided attention. And what makes you believe I will come? That the Crimson King will allow it, even if I were to request his leave? Indeed. What hubris brings you to my door at all? Oh, my friend. I am a worshipper of the Lord of Change as well. I know of his might and majesty, his many, many gifts. Do you not think I know what price will match or even exceed my requests of you? You will come with us. You will bring these beautiful beasts with you. And you will gain approval from your king with ease. Because if you do this, I will give you what you all desire. I will tell you the new location of the Black Library. And at that, the word-bearer began to fade, to disappear. And by the expression of Zamet Haket, he was not wrong. The Thousand Sons would join the crusade. But not before the portents had been read, the path confirmed. The word-bearer awoke with a smile and softly spoke. Only a few more to gather, then it can begin. Now. Soon time to take on the portents, to wake prophecy and read its wonders. Soon time to find the last holy seeker of truth, the scribe. Don't worry, Oculus. I have been delayed, but I am coming. And you, O last holy seeker of truth, you, the scribe, will be my very eyes within the camp of the Lord Commander himself. With your knowledge at my command, we will finally launch the crusade. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the important factions, forces, and monsters of the Warhammer 40k universe. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we are to discuss one of my favourite models and monsters of all time. Yes, of course, I can only be speaking of the horror that is the Mutalith Vortex beast. And what a horror it is. I do not feel we need too much beating around the bush on this one. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, Mutalith Vortex beasts. No creature embodies the warped will of Tzeench more than the Mutalith Vortex beast. These nightmarish monstrosity are as large as they are twisted, towering above infantry and even tanks as they bound across the battlefield. Their thunderous roar reverberates for miles in every direction, piercing the psyche of all in earshot and filling their mind's eye with visions of paradoxical horror. Yet this projected terror is surpassed by the reality of the Mutalith Vortex beast crashing into the enemy army. Its rippling musculature grows, splits and reknits, Its rippling musculature grows, splits and reknits as the creature thrashes violently. Massive razor-jagged claws shred through tank armor, exposing those inside to the aura of ravaging flux that surrounds the Vortex beast. From its betentacled maw, tendrils formed from warp-putrefied inner organs flap voraciously outwards, tearing infantry limb from limb, or constricting the hapless victims before drawing their crushed bodies deep inside the monster's mashing gullet. The formation of a Mutalith Vortex beast is an entirely unnatural process, yet they can be brought into being by the currents of warp energy that flow over the surface of the planet of the sorcerers. Often, this occurs when dozens of chaos spawn get caught in an empiric eddy and are fused together by the swirl of raw magic. These abominable conglomerations typically perish quickly, collapsing under the weight of their own incongruous form into a quivering mound of warp-infused ooze. But on occasion, the will of Tzeench binds the hypermutated flesh and bone together into a monstrous composite far more deadly than the sum of its hideous parts. Over the millennia, many sorcerers have attempted to create their own Mutalith Vortex beasts with obscure spells to induce the gross transformation. Even when such an invocation succeeds, more often than not, the sorcerer is consumed by their own magic, their flesh being added to the writhing matter of their creation. Other Mutalith Vortex beasts are formed from supremely powerful sorcerers who, at the moment they believe they achieve demonhood, fall victim to the cruel whims of their fickle patron. The hulking body of a Vortex beast acts as an empiric reservoir, drawing in and absorbing chaos energy. This energy saturates the creature's flesh, at once holding its impossible anatomy together and tearing it apart. The constant struggle between entropy and coalescence creates a swirling psychic tempest around the Mutalith Vortex beast, a storm of flux power that engulfs all who draw near, steadily warping their existence. The sorcerers of the Thousand Suns revel in this change field, watching with great pleasure as real space is racked by strange mutations. As the Vortex beast's flesh is torn apart by cannon fire and hacking blades, torrents of unreleased power bleed onto the battlefield, causing ever more anarchic fluctuations in reality. Before herding a Mutalith Vortex beast to battle, the Thousand Suns harnessed a creature with a great pointed star made of fire taken from atop the tower of the Cyclops. Bound within this burning chaos icon is an orb, a fractured piece of the great eye that crowns Magnus's tower, and through this burning portal, the raging chaos winds from the planet of the sorcerers are channeled, allowing the raw power of the Thousand Suns world to seep freely onto the battlefield. End quote. Ah, the Mutalith. How I adore thee! Not only is it an amazing model, but it has a very special place in my heart for a myriad of reasons. Now, one of the first reasons is its effect on reality. And I know we have not spoken too much of the Lord of Change yet, Tzeench, but we will do in short order very soon. I hope it to be one of the first videos I perform after a short break. I will need all of my skills to reflect this most complicated of dark gods correctly. But also, it harkens back to a time when there was a lot more emphasis on random elements, chaotic battlefields and unpredictable armies and effects. Something I boil down to one word: fun. But there has been a very long trudge towards the removal of these elements to satisfy an ever-increasing concentration on loudly stated needs of the competitive scene. Now, do not take this as any slight on competitive players and matches, for there is none. I fully acknowledge the enticing spectacle of the tournament, the heady exhilaration of the victory from skill and planning, and a helpful dollop of luck, maybe. But I do feel that sometimes the drive to satisfy a very loud element of the fandom has slanted things in perhaps the wrong way. For truth be told, no matter how often one might dream of a victory at a tournament, the amount of games and hobby hours spent at such events is infinitesimal compared to the power of the Force. Is infinitesimal compared to the time most hobbyists spend playing just for fun. And it is in this beast that we see the fun that can be had. For it is a thing of utter chaos, as I hope I have shown. A totally unpredictable element that can have massive effects on the field. and the look of raised eyebrows or even a slackening of the shoulders when it is first seen on the board by any opponent can speak volumes as to the nature of the game to be played. But sometimes another player would not even know what it does, what it is. So ignored is this beautiful beastie. And when told, their eyes might just light up at the massive opportunities for a madcap game of true hilarity. For in each round one rolls for a power or effect on a chart and then applies it. These abilities or effects vary from heaps of mortal wounds, that's unavoidable damage that goes straight through any protections or armour, to buffing friendly units. So not even the owner will ever truly know what they can do and what they will do on the board. It also adds the fun watching your friends struggle with the age-old conundrum of this type of unit. Do I concentrate my fire on it or no? On the one hand, it may well be next to useless when it does hit my lines, so why bother? But on the other hand, it could be utterly brutal. There is simply no way to know. So do I shoot it off the table right now? But of course, if I or anyone else chooses to shoot the Mutalith off the board, well, then we're not shooting something far more dangerous. The same used to be true more often of Orcs, Chaos and their like. The odd mechanics that led to a truly raucous and utterly unpredictable matchup was always something I looked forward to with great relish. Now there are less of these elements due to the nature of competitive play and the need for predictability in forces. I for one bemoan this without any antipathy or ire towards its causes. I would just think that a more dramatic breach between the lists possible for tournaments and those of narrative play should be aligned, and for GW to be much more front and centre in the competitive scene, so we can get more of a balance. Where the tournament lists are fair and effective, but the narrative wacky players, like myself, cannot be constrained so much. A tricky line to walk, but one I think would be worth the effort. For weird and wonderful units and monsters like the Mutalith Vortex beast should be played with as much, if not more so, than the standard toys. Because I feel they lend something that a lot more people need these days, and at the moment especially, what with everything going on. For they provide lashings of harmless, good-natured, morale-raising silliness. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to Mutalith Vortex beasts. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth of what we are doing, then do also consider joining our Patreon, or giving the video a share if that is beyond your present scope. It will be a great boon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.